wasn't until June of 2024 when I had my relapse literally a decade later. I thought I had some nasal congestion and some ear fullness. I was told from my oncologist in 2014 that if the cancer ever came back, it would be localized in the same region, so mostly in the stomach. So I went there and he's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of inflammation in your right nostril. He's like, you're a B-cell lymphoma survivor, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like 10 years, into this. He's like, do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity? I'm like, what? I'm like, so now we're having a conversation about cancer. I thought I was just going to go there for nasal meds.
Welcome to the Well to Lead podcast, where we explore the dynamic relationship between personal wellness and effective leadership. So, Savio, welcome to the Well to Lead podcast this afternoon, man. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Bobby. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to get started and to actually drop some knowledge bombs.
Hey, listen, man, you've already dropped some knowledge bombs. I should have hit the record button when I first got you on. So before we get going, man, how about you give us a rundown on Savio and how you kind of evolved into some of the things that you're doing today, and we'll get jamming from there.
So my professional background is I'm a keynote and TEDx speaker. I'm a journalist at this point. I've interviewed probably about 2,000 plus leaders, change makers, and also celebrities. I'm also a board certified health and wellness coach, best-selling author. But beyond all that, I'm also a 2-time cancer survivor. That really shocks a lot of people. It's also triggering to a lot of people as well. But I'm really here to say that no matter what the obstacle is in your life, there is a way forward. It's going to be hard, but it's possible. And so I'm really coming in with my not only experience and expertise in healthcare leadership, but also as a human who's trying to survive a disruptive world, socially, politically, and now technologically with AI.
No, I get it. You're right. That's those are some great points there. And certainly, I know you got just a really, really powerful journey and transformation that you've been on. What led you to get into speaking and doing a lot of the talks? I mean, I know you've been a TEDx speaker, and you mentioned earlier about working with a lot of folks and helping them in that area. Is this something you always look to do, or were looking to do, or how'd you evolve into this?
Great question. And it's a question I get asked often. So I always knew I had to do something with computers. I was part of the dot-com boom back in the day in the late
Yeah,
90s,
remember that?
and also, unfortunately, the dot-com crash.
Yep.
And so I worked with a lot of startups, a lot of dot-coms back in the day. And then I also sort of transitioned into working on a production company with a couple of individuals. Truthfully, it was okay. It just wasn't really that fruitful. But what really got me into the work that I do now is life. In 2014, I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Came out of nowhere. Usually cancer does. It doesn't reside on both of my maternal or paternal side of the family. It's a blood cancer. And basically, it was a roller coaster ride. I started having drenching night sweats. My stomach was starting getting distended, larger and larger. And so at the time, I relied on a naturopath, a doctor who I was seeing for a while, who basically analyzed my blood work and my diet structure. And he's like, oh, something is strange here. You need to go and seek mainstream medicine and you need to get a sonogram. And I'm like, okay. So I got a sonogram, and literally an hour and a half later, they told me to go to the hospital. And I was admitted to the 5th floor. And later that night, I heard nurses talking that I would be transferred to the 7th floor. And basically, I was in the hospital for 15 days. 2 days before I left, they told me I had to get R-CHOP chemotherapy. And then after I left the hospital, I had 5 more rounds every 3 weeks. And I ended up getting a remission status 4.5 months later. And I was in remission for a decade until June of 2024. So I tell people healthcare and wellness, it's not just a professional subject matter. It's real life. It's personal, and it's affecting a lot of young people now, which for me, I look at this work as not a burden, but as a huge responsibility that I want to shoulder.
Yeah. Now, if you don't mind me asking, Salvio, how old were you at the time when you first got diagnosed?
Sure, I was 38 years old, and at
Yeah.
that point in my life, besides seeing a naturopath, I didn't even take aspirin. I mean, I was, like, working out 6 days a week. I was eating organic, hormone-free foods. I was meditating daily. I was keeping stress as low as possible. I mean, I was dealing with work stress, but in terms of my own personal stress, was all manageable. So I did, quote unquote, all the right things. But blood cancer is a mysterious thing. You can ask any oncologist, any hematologist, and they'll say to you they have no idea what the origins are. It could be genetic, could be environmental, it just could be the luck of the draw, right? Why are infants born with the ailments they're born with? It just is what
Right.
it is.
No, that's powerful, man, and you're right. I mean, some things, we can't control, nor do we have, any answers as to why. And it's interesting how you have literally took something like cancer and you took the challenges, the pain, the suffering, all of the things that come along with that, the disruption in your life because it came out of nowhere. There was no warning signs or anything like that to kind of tee you up that something like this could happen. So disruption, life completely, turned upside down, but you were able somehow to transition all of that into a positive flow of life where you're touching lives and inspiring people. At what point, Salvio, did you, because I know there was a lot that you went through, but how long did it take for you to transition to a point where you say, you know what, let me use this pain for good? How
So
long did it
it
take you to
was
get there?
so I hit my remission status 4.5 months later after the R-CHOP treatment, but I knew that I had to hit the 5-year mark because everyone kept telling me, the doctors, once you hit 5 years, it's less likely. It's not a guarantee, but less likely to come back. So I didn't wanna build something and then have it crumble down. So in 2019, which is 5 years later, which is interestingly a year before COVID, I decided to get my board certification in health and wellness coaching. At the time, I had a podcast. I was always a writer, so I had a lot of articles, and then transitioned to becoming a journalist as well. And so I knew for me that the work was centered around this idea of what's the crisis, not only surviving the crisis, but what do you do after it? How do you recalibrate? How do you figure out not only a new normal, but a new way forward? And it wasn't until June of 2024 when I had my relapse, literally a decade later, that I realized for myself that so just some brief overview. I basically went on a routine visit to my ENT. I thought I had some nasal congestion and some ear fullness. I was told from my oncologist in 2014 that if the cancer ever came back, it would be localized in the same region, so mostly in the stomach. So I went there and he's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of inflammation in your right nostril. He's like, you're a B cell lymphoma survivor, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like 10 years, into this. He's like, "Do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "So now we're having a conversation about cancer. I thought I was just gonna go there for nasal meds." And he's like, "You know what? I've been burned as a doctor before." So he's like, "Let's be on the safe side. Let's do an MRI." He did an MRI. He looked, "Oh, yeah, that's weird." He's like, "Let's do a biopsy." And literally, Bobby, 3 PM Friday, I get a MyChart notification telling me it's a relapse, even though I saw my oncologist weeks before and got the okay for the year. And the next day was my 25th college reunion. And I was communicating with people via email for weeks before that. And I didn't have the courage, the stamina, or even the desire to pretend everything's fine when I just found out that I had a relapse.
Right, right. No, I can only imagine how you were feeling during that time. I mean, that's got to be crushing. And you've obviously learned a lot and went through a lot from this experience, but crises hit people in different ways. Some come, maybe sometime they're not so much of a surprise, but then there are other times where crises happen where they catch you completely off guard. And if you were to maybe give us, our listeners, some insight as to how you are able to navigate crisis, be that physical, relationship, or any type of crisis that just comes out of nowhere, what are some of the things that you feel like you've learned that you could share with us and how to navigate crises?
So on keynote stages, I speak about this idea of adaptive resilience framework. And really what it posits is that the body sends stress signals. It sends us not only a feeling emotionally or cognitive overload or cognitive pressure, it actually affects our day-to-day decision making. It allows us to feel like we have to lean more on our roles rather than our humanity. And AI is testing that for a lot of
Yep.
us now. And really, for me, the key element is there is what I mirrored when I was in the hospital. So went through a stem cell transplant. I was in the hospital for 29 days in a quarantine room. I lost 26 pounds. And in that, there was a couple of things that I realized. This idea of psychological distancing. Like my problem was here, but how can I create a buffer between my problem and what was actually happening? How do I create self-regulation? Bobby, could I control my red blood cells, my platelets, my white blood cells, all the markers they were looking for? Can I control that? No. Them doing tests every 4 hours wasn't changing any of that. But what I could do is I could rely on my emotional balance. I could meet the doctors where they were because we were working together on healing
Right.
me. I also reframed the chemo not as poison, but as an elixir. In the Bible, they speak very heavily about mana, life force from the universe that's being given. And so I knew that if I resisted rather than submit to it or actually surrender to it, I was not going to allow those scientifically medicines to actually work with my body. And then the other thing that I also did was I leaned on adaptive resilience. It's like when you're in the SHIT, rather than sort of freaking out, how can you be flexible or make connections on figuring out how to move forward? Literally accepting what's going on rather than pretending that it should go away. Literally leaning into the discomfort. So I would say, above all this that I'm saying, is that I think people need to get more reality based and not really focus on the fact that they don't like it or they hate it. No one wants to be there. I didn't wanna feel lethargic and gross and diarrhea and have all those things. I even had tachycardia. Every time I would stand up, my pulse would go to, like, 170. They had to rush me to ICU to get norepinephrine one night. It was that bad.
Wow.
But in life, as you know as well, and as your listeners know, we don't get to choose what our battles are. We only get to choose how we move forward with them.
No, that's good stuff, man. And I tell you, it's refreshing to hear what you just said, because again, folks who may be listening at the show today, I mean, they may be facing a crisis right now and not knowing how to navigate it. Because sometimes what happens also, Savio, when folks are dealing with crises, is that you spend a period of time dealing with blame or trying to blame someone, yourself, or that this shouldn't have happened to me. Why am I? I'm 38 years old. Why would something like this happen to me? Did you go through a season where you were, having to confront blaming yourself or blaming someone else?
So I grew up with a Catholic faith. It served me extremely well. I was even an altar boy. I went to a Catholic elementary school. But in college, I knew that I wanted to explore other belief systems. So I studied from that point till now, everything from Buddhism, Jewish mysticism, all the way to Vedic philosophy. So when this happened to me, honestly, the fear wasn't really dying. It was, I didn't live fully. I didn't finish what I came here to do. I let myself down. I let other people down. It was more of that because as you know, none of us escape this reality without scars. None of us escape this reality without some bruises. None of us escape at all. We have to find that transition. It happens to all of us. And so for me, that was the most fearful thing because none of us know what happens to us afterwards. But I am comfortable with the fact that I know there is something else. I can't name it, I can't prove it, but I just know.
It's interesting you mentioned something about not really living like, the life that you really wanted to live, prior to this happening, right? Because I think sometimes what goes on with most folks is that, we live in this life and things are going well, or, and you just kind of take life for granted that you could have something like this to happen, right? And you put off things that you could do or wanted to do, or maybe you just kind of like say, well, I really would love to do such and such, but I don't have the time to do it now. I need to focus on making money. But it just seems like that something like this helps to bring you back to a reality check that you mentioned. And also it lets you it helps you to see that we all got an expiration date, so to speak. We all gonna pass at some point, right? And that life is certainly fragile in that sense, but it's also so valuable for us to make sure that we're spending time doing those things that add value and helps to change lives. I mean,
I
has that changed your perspective?
Yeah, I like the fact that you made a salient point there because that was my parents. I grew up Asian Indian household. As soon as I got my so I went through all the treatment, 16
Hmm.
months. I did physical therapy, immunotherapy, stem cell transplant, literally 16 months of treatment. And in between, before I did my immunotherapy, I did scans. I got a complete response, CR. They also call it a complete remission, but I don't use the word remission anymore.
Yeah,
As you could
right.
probably wonder why. And my parents were like, okay, go back to life, go back to work,
Yep.
whatever, do. And I'm like, no, I can only get well now. I can always make money later. I don't, I, I can only get better now. So I literally, Bobby, sought out everything in healing because I'm a firm believer and I will die on this sword. Healing is not linear. There's not one way to heal. It's up, down, left, right. It's not always in a successive motion. And so for me, I just knew that I had to seek out. So I literally did everything from like literally things like ecstatic dance to like internal family systems work, to osteopathic manipulation, like literally everything. The only thing I didn't try was psychedelics. And that's the reason why is because I'm a firm believer that if you open any door in life, you have to be responsible as to what you're
Right.
opening. And
Right.
I didn't want to
Right.
open the door to the mind because the body was in trauma. So why am I going to open the mind to something that's not in trauma and cause myself more issues? And so going back to the point that you made earlier, I was always aware of the fact that this was serious. Like I didn't pretend. And this dovetails into a TEDx talk. I know I talked to you that I did my TEDx talk in Raleigh, North
Yeah.
Carolina, which is
Yeah.
close to where you are. And in that, I have a mini framework called the Aloha Reboot. And as we know in Hawaiian, aloha means hello. And so it's a hello to your inner self. So A basically stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge where you are. Like I was in the hospital, I was tied to these machines, I was in a quarantine room. I didn't know when I would come out. Eventually I came out and 29 days later, I lost 26 pounds. Like I literally was just being really realistic about it. Brain dump. I just said everything. I just spoke my fears, spoke my truth. L stands for listening. So listen to your inner self. And in Hawaiian, actually, they have a healing modality called huna healing. And in huna healing, they believe that the body not only sends you sensations, but sends wisdom, intelligence. There's a consciousness to it. But the only way to do it is what real life showed me, which was two things that are anchors that no one could take away from you, that you could do anywhere, which is what? Silence and stillness. I had those two anchors and they allowed me to actually get in touch with my body. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut, but you can do whatever you want. And it doesn't mean that the body is actually giving you language, it's actually giving you information. There's a difference between the two. O stands for opening. So open yourself up to this, no matter what your belief system is. H stands for harnessing. So harness that wisdom, and try to make the mental connection and see what works, what doesn't. And A stands for acting. And I always put a caveat and I always say you need courage to act because the data points to the fact that it's not that we as humans don't want to change, it's that we don't know how to change because we don't know if we're thinking about change, pre contemplation, actually in change, thinking that we want to regress from the change. And so for the most part, we need the courage in order to move forward properly.
No, that's good stuff, man. I got you. It's interesting. You said something about what you did. You at you talked about listening, and because the body gives us like signals. It can It can let us know stuff. And that triggered something in my remembrance about something that I tell people now is when I had lost about maybe 3.5 years ago, I lost like 100 pounds all naturally, had all types of health issues, and I was just in bad shape. I mean, just period. I was just really, I mean, it was wreaking havoc on my life in terms of being overweight and stuff. So what happened for me when I began to lose the weight, I start noticing something that required me to pay attention and be silent. Like you just mentioned, just start listening because my body was letting me know on this journey what works and how it's supposed to function. And dude, I had tried every diet under the sun for the last probably 20 years, man. I've been struggling with my weight and I tried everything, but this was the only time where my body was that I paid enough attention, but I had to I remember listening. I remember paying attention and being still. And I don't know when that happened during that 12 months or so time frame it took me to lose the weight, but I noticed when I came out that I could listen and my body would let me know what's happening. And I that's the first time that ever I really had that experience. But I just wanted to share that as you were talking about that piece because a lot of times, you know, if we pay attention and we get still and listen, our body will let us know, you know, that this is not something you should be doing. This you shouldn't be eating this. This is not working. You know, all the signals it can send off to help us, you know, obtain the healing that we need or improve the situation. But sometimes we just got so much noise going on.
Well, first of all, congratulations. That's huge. The fact that
Thank
you
you.
did it all naturally is even more impressive. And it really goes back to sometimes it's about deleting things from our life rather than
Yep.
adding things from our
Yep.
life.
Yep.
And especially the healthcare leaders I work with, you can imagine high stakes, not only for themselves or for the organization, but for another human being. And there's cognitive overload that happens, cognitive pressure that happens. There's decision making that gets skewed. They fall back on their roles, and then the role then creates an armor. And so there's a reason why they often say that doctors don't make great patients because they're great at their expertise and what they do, but not really great at leading forward. Because what's leadership? And this is a whole big thing. Leadership is just how people see you, how they want to follow you, how they want to emulate you, how they want to mirror you. That's what leadership is. And if you yourself aren't calibrated in the right way through all the things that we talked about earlier, then how are you supposed to lead effectively and have other people
No, no, you're right.
follow?
That's a very valid point, and so many times people struggle in that leadership capacity because a lot of times they don't know how to lead, and oftentimes you got the responsibility of folks under you that you're supposed to be managing and leading, but you don't know how to connect with folks to be able to lead them in an effective manner. But I wanted to ask you, when speaking of leadership, when disruption happens, what what would you say are some things that folks can learn from a leadership perspective that disruption teaches?
Well, the number one thing is everyone wants to get out of the discomfort. So when disruption happens, they just want an easy fix. But what I and what the research points to said you have to name it. You have to
Yeah.
be okay with it. You have to actually sink into the discomfort rather than try to avoid it. Because the only way through that is literally through that. So when disruption hits, and we're going through a lot politically, socially, and technologically with AI. So how do you deal with it? You really come back to center with yourself because you are the one that's actually creating change, creating um, ways to do, creating activities, creating new methods, creating new frameworks. And if you yourself are not quote unquote balanced, then how do you do that? For me, meditation works. I've been meditating for 20 years, started off like 1 minute. Now I'm 20 minutes a day. Literally, if I don't have it, it doesn't work. And for me, it's simple. I don't chant, I don't hum. I just listen to instrumental music. As soon as I wake up, I lie down and I just do my thing. But for other people, it's prayer. It could be journaling, breathing exercises. It could be vagus nerve stimulation if you have a device or you do your own sort of ways of activating that. Just find some ways to allow that disruption to not disrupt your inner core. Because I think what ends up happening is we look at the environment and what needs to be fixed. And sometimes what needs to be fixed is how we actually perceive rather than how we actually dictate.
That's powerful what you just shared right there. But when you got certified, you got into the wellness space. How did you figure out to get connected and working, with the healthcare industry? I mean, why move into that industry, and tell us a little bit more about your role and some of the things you do in helping folks in that healthcare space.
So my official title is board certified health and wellness coach. So I knew for a long time that wellness and health are siloed. They just are. And truth be told, I'm a journalist, so I've had some uber experiences in wellness. Okay, literally in Italy and in Mexico, like great experiences. So I'm not knocking those, but they're also not accessible, and they're not for an average person with a limited amount of means. They're really expensive. And I can see why healthcare then feels that people are being taken advantage of. But then again, on the same token, there are things that healthcare lacks, because once your care team is over, once I had my stem cell transplant and all that, and that's it. You're left to your own devices. You have to figure out the new way. And so I think healthcare can learn a lot from wellness as well. And so for me, I think it's very important to make people understand, once again, that healthcare is not linear. Health is not linear. Wellness is not linear. It ebbs and flows. And I get the most joy and thing that lights me up because my lived experience, my professional leanings allowed me to actually not only study the work, but actually live the work, to actually see the gap, what I call the post crisis leadership gap. Literally, there's this gap that happens, and that gap then creates drift and then creates even bigger chasm.
Mm, powerful. Are there any specific organizations that you work with, or these individuals that you primarily work with when it comes to helping from the coaching standpoint?
So I'm an executive coach, so it's mostly executives within the healthcare space.
Okay.
I'm not sort of relegated to one particular organization or corporation, because I find that the work actually lands better when they don't think that there's an agenda behind, that I'm not trying to push a certain way of doing things. And when I do keynotes, it's always for who actually resonates, aligns with that type of information for the organization. Because shocking and maybe not unshocking, but it's been reported that there's $935 billion in healthcare waste per year in the US. That's shocking. And people think, oh, that's equipment and all. No, that's human bodies making human decisions. That's a lack of foresight. That's a lack of intelligence. That's a lack of actually execution.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, is this, perhaps someone listening might be interested in touching base with you. Is there a process that you go through in evaluating whether you might be a good fit to work with a particular person?
Yeah. So it really echoes back to my adaptive resilience framework, really about the signals or the stress signals that are being sort of sent.
I got you.
How does
Yeah.
composure, clarity come into place? How do you actually self-regulate yourself? How do you make decision making from that high stakes of a level and that viewpoint? Figure out for yourself actually what works in an organization, what doesn't. What is the actual breadth of your ability to actually create change within an organization? And so those are like C-suite, deep level conversations that often most people don't want to speak to. Like there's like this hidden thing that healthcare leaders don't want to speak to because they themselves have this role to fill.
Right.
And it's really interesting, and I can tell this little quick story. Before my relapse in June of 2024, my editor gave me an assignment. I cover health, wellness, leadership. That's my beat.
Hmm.
But he's like, "Do you want to go to the Oscars red carpet and cover that?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like,
Wow.
"Okay, okay,
Yeah.
not my thing." So I'm there with a whole bunch of entertainment journalists. They all come over. And I realized something, Bobby. They're all acting. The actors were acting. They were still in a role. And I'm like, oh my God, here I'm thinking they're like real people. Like, no, because they're acting for me as a journalist. They're acting for their managers, the handlers, the photographers. And I learned a great lesson. And maybe it's the coach brain, it's the keynote brain, it's the journalist brain in me that I'm like, "Oh, there's something underneath the glacier, and they're not showing you that." And so I tell that story because I want people to understand that we don't it's great to lean on our expertise, and we should be vetted, and we should those things are important. But what's really important is how we relate to one another in a human context, because AI can create so much content and pretend that it's getting to know you, but it really doesn't know you. Only humans know.
No, no, you right. Oh gosh, that's a whole nother conversation for us to have maybe on a part two of this, man. Because it's amazing how we have. It seems like the world has lost a lot of authenticity, and the technology, as good as it can be in ways in helping us, has been also a detriment that has caused us to become less personable. We've lost the ability to communicate, the human factor, and with AI on the rise, it's almost like magnified it so quickly, right? To like, man, you don't know what's real, you don't know what's and it's interesting. You went to this event and people are still you would think that, okay, maybe they would just be chill and we could just kind of like vibe and stuff, and they came in with this wall up, put up this shield, let me act. let me let me pretend. And it's unfortunate, man, that that's kind of how things are now for a lot of folks. They don't know who they are. They don't feel comfortable in their own skin, so to speak. And then certainly at certain events, you feel like you got to put on this front. And that's a lot of weight to carry. I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to try to be like someone else, man. I had too much fun being Bobby than trying to be like somebody else.
Well, I think for me, origin story was a little different. So I wasn't born in this country. I was born in India. Came in, I was 3 years old. I lived in a small little suburb in New York, about an hour north from New York City. And all I wanted to do is fit in. And quite honestly, I did a great job at doing that. But it was only until I became a young adult, college, after college, I realized, wait a minute, the only person I can actually be is me. And that includes a myriad of good things, bad things, terrible things, wonderful things, and I need to let that lead forward. But it's really funny because in the spaces that we all work in, like healthcare leadership, have these like technical terms, strategic reversals and increasing ramp. Yeah, and those are like beautiful words to use. But if you actually speak that to someone, are they first of all going to understand you? Second of all, is it really going to stick? And third of all, is it really going to create change? What really works, and actually, someone sent me a video today about Obama speaking, and he was talking about the political climate. And he actually was in the conversation talking about furniture and how we can disagree on furniture, but we have to realize that it's furniture. When when you call it an animal, but it's really furniture, then we have dissenting, viewpoints. And it's funny, and I'll tell you a really personal thing. So I have a sibling. I have two siblings. One of them is on a completely different political equation than me. It was a lot of tension for many years. But after my stem cell transplant, I realized something, Bobby, really deep. I realized that both of us are not going to move because for me, I don't want anyone to be disenfranchised in any way because I don't want to feel disenfranchised, but she has a different persuasion. So I said, okay, well, what can we agree on? So we both have our parents still living, so we love them. So we agree on that. We talk about that. We both love food and we both love travel. So let's talk about the things that we can talk about
Yeah.
because our divides are not going to come closer. There is a barrier. I wish that it changes, but at the moment, the reality, which is part of my Aloha Reboot, accept the things that are, name the things that are. Now, when I mean name, I don't mean identify with it because that can trap you. I mean actually speak it and realize.
No, I love that, dude. There's always common ground if you look for it. And you don't have to stay stuck in the areas of differences that you may have. But I'm telling you, what you just shared a few minutes ago, um, I want to reiterate to our audience about being themselves because they have a story that's very unique to them. You draw a lot from your experiences. Your experiences are unique to you, and therefore it makes you unique in what you have to offer folks, not only from a personal standpoint, but in the marketplace. And if we could just keep that in mind, that we have something unique to us, that we can add value to others' lives, if we just try not to be like others. And I picked that up when you were talking because I'm saying your story is totally unique. It's totally unique. And it's the thing that I believe that sets you apart from a host of other board certified wellness coaches out there. Your approach, the way you view life, it's all unique to you. And I appreciate you sharing this, dude, because I got moved and when you said that and oh gosh, I could probably talk another hour or two with you, but I know we we both got things to do, right? But let me ask you this. We were talking offline about the TEDx. How did you get your first TEDx talk? Because I know a lot of people might be interested in finding out about the process and going through that. How'd you get your first talk?
So what people have to understand is TEDx, there's hundreds of them, literally,
Yeah.
not only domestically, but internationally. And they're run by organizers that actually have to align with TED, the actual organization.
Right. Right.
And basically only have a few spots left. Some of them have 10 a year. Some of them have 6, some of them have 20, really depends. For me, I knew I only had one shot at this. So I actually joined a cohort where they actually showed us how to actually apply, how to find them, how to actually, because TEDx and TED are all about what is your one idea worth spreading. Not 5 ideas worth spreading, not 5, not one idea and 6 subhead. No, what is one idea? And for me, the title of my TEDx talk was 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And people were like, what? Inner stranger? And someone asked me, like, what do you mean? Like, what's the inner stranger? Like, what? And I'm like, I left it nebulous on purpose because I wanted you to think and I wanted you to feel. So someone asked me, like, so what's your inner stranger? I'm like, the inner stranger, honestly, is that young person who never felt like rooted. I never felt grounded. Like even a friend used to joke around and call me nomad. Like I was friends with everyone. Thankfully, I wasn't bullied or anything like that. But I just never felt completely tied to like the planet. I just never did. And then she's like, oh, the inner stranger for me is that ideal professional woman that I can't live up to, or that great mother that I want to be, or that great sibling that I want to be, that I try and I just can't meet it. And for me, the TEDx was, I knew I had one shot at this idea worth spreading. And so I applied, through this cohort program. And basically, I would tell a lot of people is know the idea, know how you want to express that idea, but also chisel away at the core element of what that idea really means. Because when I was in this cohort, we had a lot of writing. I think I'm a journalist, okay? So, and I'm a writer. I think I had like 69 revisions. 69 revisions. Yes. And you only get one shot, right? Because yes, you can apply next year, but for that 1 year. And literally out of 400 applications, they only chose 10. So it's a 4% acceptance, literally less than some Ivy Leagues that you can get into for some colleges. So it was that competitive. I did it in Raleigh, North Carolina, like I mentioned. And when I went up there, and I'll share this little tidbit, I started off with a question of, if you see yourself in the mirror, do you recognize the person staring back at you? It was something to that effect. And a lot of people were like, they caught their breath because they're like, okay, so this is going to be a deep conversation. But so to test my resilience, which that's how it worked for the universe, they chose me to go first. I went there. I spoke for about a minute and a half, technical difficulties. Now there's a room full of live people. I'd probably say close to 200 people there. It was filmed. It was filmed as well. So like, Savio, can you start again? Went again. 2.5 minutes, technical difficulty.
Are you serious?
And at that point, I could have done 2 things. And apparently people have done this where they completely messed up and they just leave the stage. They don't even do their talk, even after months of preparing. I said, I've been through cancer once. At that point, it was only cancer once. And I said, no, I'm a New Yorker.
Right.
I've
Right.
been through
Right.
9/11. I've
Right.
been through a
Right.
business crash. I've been through a
Come on.
.com. Like,
Yes.
come on, this is not. And so I went, and actually I stumbled because at that point, right, 2 times, but I said, I think I needed it. I needed that rush of adrenaline to say, I'm going to finish it. And I did it. And thankfully it resonated. And that was really the whole point and the purpose of it. But at the end of the day, I think for most people who want to aspire to do a TEDx talk or anything like that, you have to really ask yourself one big question. And the question is, am I doing it for me or am I doing it for who I want to serve?
That's powerful.
And I think that's what guided me is that I did it for the people I wanted to serve. I wanted to tell a story about the experience of coming through something as hard as cancer, but also coming through it from the perspective and from the professional leanings that I come.
Wow, man, that's incredible. You know, you talked a lot about resilience and you've been sharing a lot about it this podcast, and what a testimony about having to lean into resilience with that on the stage ready to go do this TEDx talk. And you have, of all things, you're first in line, but now you having all these technical difficulties and restarts. Man, good gosh. You talk about resilience. Oh, dude, powerful stuff, man.
9 of the speakers afterwards said to me, "That's amazing." They're like, "I literally don't know if I could have done it." And one of the people was in prison. Okay. And he said that
Wow.
to me. He's like, "I can't believe," he's like, I would have folded." And
Yeah.
not it wasn't my cohort, but apparently 2 TEDx prior to that in Raleigh, North Carolina, 4 people messed up on stage and just left. They couldn't do it. They
Wow.
just all those months of preparation and they couldn't do it.
And what's interesting is that you said something again. You've been dropping these diamonds, man. It's I mean, it's like stuff that's bam, bam, bam. You said something. I mean, when I was thinking about like just imagining myself if I had to go through that, and the thing that you mentioned about not just going there to do a talk, but having something to say, a message to deliver. So I think that's the piece that probably kept you, man, was the fact that you had to drop this message off. You had to deliver what was inside of you to these people, and the mic's messing up, the lights going out, whatever was happening was not going to stop you from delivering this message because the message was so vital. That right there, oh, dude, that's powerful because you had a different type of intent. Your intent was to serve and you had something that you knew you had to bring. But if you just you're going to do a speaking engagement and you don't think about it from that standpoint, but you're thinking about, oh, I just want to go get the speaking gig and I'm just going to go do a talk, then things happen. But if you don't have something to deliver like what you did, oh, bro, you crash and burn, you know? So
And
that's some
that only goes a little way. That doesn't go the long way.
right.
That's not sustainable. Because at the end of the day, what I believe is that whatever the reasons are for things, like literally, I tell people all the time, I could sit here and talk to you for hours about the wound, hours about what I've been through in my life. You could do probably the same with all the
Yep.
stuff you've been through, but I would rather talk about the walk.
Yep.
Why? Because the walk not only informs my actions, but allows other people to see possibilities.
Yes. Listen, dude, you got to tell us how can folks reach out to you? I know that you have a book that's out. You obviously have this TEDx talk. I'm gonna make sure we try to get a copy of that and link that copy in our show notes. But tell the audience how that they can reach out to you if they're interested in perhaps some coaching, or they want to try to get a copy of the book. What's the title of the book? Just give us a little bit more rundown on that.
Absolutely. Very easy. They can find me out on my website, saviopclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE. I have my keynote work there, my TEDx talk, 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. I also have a best-selling book I did 4 years ago. I interviewed 200 cancer survivors, and I chose 35 of their stories, told my own, and thankfully it became a bestseller. And then every Wednesday, I have a Substack newsletter where I talk about the head, heart, and gut intelligence. And I also talk about my interview series. Right now, I'm running one with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. So I'm learning a whole bunch and studying from what they're actually experiencing on the ground. And then if people want to connect with me socially, I'm at every platform at the Human Resolve. And I call it the Human Resolve because at the end of the day, what we have resolution and that's all we got.
I tell you what, Savio, I appreciate you coming on the Well to Lead podcast, man. It has certainly been a blast, and you have added tremendous value in this short amount of time. I know our audience is going to really benefit from your presence with us today. So thanks, man, for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Bobby. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's all we have for you today. Certainly appreciate you all tuning in.